All right, so I'll record. All right, cool. Ben, so let's kind of talk with like, give me like the headline, give me like the end result. Um, you've been in business for, I mean, I know you kind of joined this company that was already in process, but you've been around what, 10 years at this point? 7 years? What is this?
Yeah, the company started 13 years ago. I joined 9 years ago,
9 years ago.
late 2013. Yeah.
Okay. And in terms of people and the team, what do you think the biggest changes are from the time you joined until now, 9 years later?
Biggest change. Yeah, I was employee number 3, and now we have 58. Um, so the biggest change is, yeah, I don't. What are you asking? I mean, just like this, the whole business. I mean, or the whole story.
Well, yeah, I guess, culture wise, is like at 58 people, does it feel exactly the same as it felt as 3 people, but just much bigger? Or have you learned some lessons along the way in terms
Yeah.
of what that culture has to look like?
Yeah, 3 people. There wasn't a ton of culture. It was everyone's kind of fending for themselves. Where today there's definitely the best way of doing this. There's a lot of leadership. When I first started, I didn't know I was going to be a people manager someday, and I always thought I just had to solve the problem of property management. But as we grew, above a certain number, probably about 500 doors, I realized that this is going to have to be a leadership and a management position, and people are really what's going to be doing the job. And I didn't necessarily think the job was difficult in property management, in that it can be learned quickly as long as you had some good processes and you had people who could critically think and ask questions without like getting in trouble, or not in trouble, but that's probably not the right word, but just were able to critically think and ask questions when needed. And by doing that, we are able to eliminate, a lot of mistakes and kind of fast track on how property management's kind of done and grow. But yeah, as we came along, as growing, we hit a number of different growth pain points. One is where I was the computer, in that I was the quarterback of the business, and I had all of the information, and I was divvying that out on a daily basis. So I kind of knew what every house was doing. Then once that was real, I realized that I can't sustain that. We did turn into some technology, and so we were able to have a lot of metrics and processes that were all really easy to learn and use. But then I could self-manage and say, okay, you're responsible for this. I can point up on the screen and show, and then people were able to start understanding what they were responsible for. So if I saw a red item, I could point up there, and and after a couple pointing, they knew what they had to do to be successful. And I think that's a big part of the growing point stages. We kind of went through that, and then that got us up to a decent size, probably around in the upper 20 of people. And then we were introduced to EOS, and that was kind of like,
let me ask, at 20 people, how many doors was that? Just so I understand like how big the company was roughly.
we were probably at 900 to 1,000 doors.
Okay, so you pushed up against the 1,000 door mark with 20 people. Okay.
Yeah, probably, yeah, mid-20s probably.
Yeah.
And then we established a leadership team, and and that was 5 people. So and those people are all people who started very early in their lives and careers, interns, people straight out of high school, or people who changed careers completely. They're very green, but they had been here for 3 or 4 years and just kind of were coached along the way, taught a lot of the soft skills, not necessarily, hard skills were taught of property management along the way, but the soft skills on how to, what to look for, how to encourage, what are roles and responsibilities. And when we came up and joined EOS, it was an easier transition because we already had data, we already had process, we already had people. So those are in the book Traction. Those are, some of the major components that we are already ready for. Now we just had to add the traction, have better goals, and then we were kind of more complete. So as we developed that leadership team, they were able to take over a manager role and actually lead their teams instead of maybe just me meeting with a lot of people and just coaching. So they were able to start coaching their team, setting rocks and goals. And then that's really when the culture kind of exploded in a way that, there was much more touches, much more one-on-one. So as we grew from 20s, upper 20s, up until about 30, probably 40, which is not that long ago. It was this year at some point. So we were at probably 1,400 doors or so. We were growing, and that was working pretty well. But then we had the next layer that was stepping up, and there was enough reports where they're subject matter experts or individual contributors, but they had manager potential. So what we did is we identified them and said, you know what, instead of just being a senior person, we're going to make you a mid-level manager. And by doing that, you now are going to be taught how to have reports. And the leadership team was supposed to train them, and it happened a little too fast, to be honest. What we learned is that those individual contributors had ideas on how to manage, but they weren't always, they were very involved, and they became micromanagers, which is kind of against our culture in that, you have results and KPIs and processes to finish by the end of the day. And that is what's most important. It's not about being completely busy from 9 to 5.
Yeah.
And what those managers they were just overly involved. They didn't delegate. So they still have their player coaches. I can always relate to sports references. So,
explain what a player coach is, because I know that term and I want to hear what that means to you.
Yeah. So when we upgraded them, they were just players. They were the best player on the team, and who was maybe the captain of the team. But when we made them the coach of the team, they were player coaches, meaning that they still had operational responsibilities, and they still had a smaller book of business and things like that, and they're overseeing. But what was happening is they were keeping their book of business, and they were expected to be a coach. And when they did that, they just did not have enough bandwidth. They were not able to delegate and to train fast enough. So things started like, I can't do this anymore. So, and it kind of happened kind of quick, because we upgraded them at the beginning of the year. It took about 7 or 8 months. And then the whole thing almost went boom.
And were these, what kind of roles were these? Were they property managers, maintenance people, all across the board? Like, what were they doing day to day that they wanted to continue to play as they coached?
Yeah. Onboarding. We'll start with the early in the process. One person's an onboarding manager, one's a leasing manager, one's a maintenance manager, one is a construction manager, two of them were a property manager, senior property managers. So,
and they were successful individual contributors. They were rewarded and probably promoted because they were good at their job. And now you're judging them and valuing them based on managing and growing teams rather than contribution. And that's a big spread, right? Like that's a big change professionally.
It is a big change, and it doesn't happen overnight. And it kind of happened. I mean, the promotions kind of happened overnight because we wanted to reward them with being really good team members, and they all had potential to lead, but nobody, including our leadership team, had ever managed anybody. So there's a ton of skills involved in coaching and checking in. And, when you meet with somebody, you can talk to them, and let's just say it's a one-on-one, and you can talk metrics, but it's a check-in. It's how are you, what's making sense, how are you today, and your personal life, you know a little bit more. So you want to make sure you understand, how happy they are, what's their challenges, and you want to try to remove those as much as you can. We're in property management, we're always going to get yelled at, but why did we get yelled at? There's a lot of the 5 whys and things like that of really kind of narrowing down and upgrading the process. But so I guess to sum up this whole thing is, we just continuously trained. We had, I did some coaching sessions, training sessions for everybody. But I realized it's probably not the best use of my time. So I did hire a professional coach, and they're a leadership coach, so that everyone can ask questions. We can all see how we scored on the Colby score, how everyone thinks. We can work together, and we've making major changes since then. And then the player coach part of it was, they said I can't do both, and I said fine, I will go draft 13 people. So we hired 13 people last quarter, and I removed 95% of their operational duties so they could focus and lead their departments and not be player coaches, because I couldn't ask for both.
Yeah.
I can't say, you got to be a great leader.
So is that one of the big lessons, Ben, is that, the individual contribution and the coaching are a little bit of a conflict, and it's kind of a like a conflict to ask people to be good at both? Is that what you felt like you took away from this, that you would do differently next time?
Yeah, I think I would. What would I do next time? Yeah, I wouldn't have rushed it quite as fast as what happened. I think one or two reports, and do a little bit slower coaching, and make sure they have all the skills that they need to be able to do it. And also for the leadership team, which again is one level up, to recognize some of those early indicators that they're not delegating, or what is the weakness of those people, because again, the leadership team's never really delegated off their job before. So there's a lot of stuff we had to kind of learn together. But if I were to do it again, yeah, I would just make sure that there's enough bandwidth and just enough toolbox skills. And you're not expected to maintain your same level of operational performance if you are going to lead any people. You can't do both. You can't. You can't. So there's going to be an operational or efficiency hit when you do this.
My takeaway on this, Ben, and I want you to challenge if it's not correct, is that your scale and your success is because you went from kind of a 2-layer management structure. It's like, we're in charge and then everyone's doing the work. And you started to actually invest into a multi-layer structure, right? Like there's department managers and so what you did is what we all do as small businesses. You promoted the best people at their job to become the department heads. And it was kind of that, old cliche of like, on Friday, you're in charge of sales, you're in charge of property management, you're in charge of maintenance, but on Monday, you're now in charge of the department. And we probably underappreciate what a shift that is. And it sounds like you actually did that with multiple people all at once. You were just like, hey guys, we're going from 11 of us to 22 of us overnight. Is that a correct, am I summing that up right?
Yeah, it was 5. It went from 5 leadership to having 6 mid-level. So 5 plus 6 is 11, but in total. But yeah, that's kind of what happened. And I was supporting the leadership team and stating that my people are ready to step up. My people are ready to, they're doing good and their check-ins are hitting their numbers. But yeah, they didn't have the skill sets there. Yeah, and
they were great individual performers.
Yes.
And so
they definitely have potential,
right? Yeah, and you had potential. So you assume like, oh, no problem. We'll come back on Monday and they'll run the department. Because right. I've been there. I'm saying that tongue in cheek because I've been there before. I'm like, oh, we got this amazing performer, like she can run the department, and like, but I think that the lesson was it's an entirely new skill. It's an entirely new set of skills that has to happen to manage others, right?
Exactly. And the leadership team again was coached over 2 to 3 years to get the skill sets that they had from me. And it was a slow process. So yeah, we kind of jumped it, but we were growing and things. It's just a good lesson learned. And yeah, if I could help someone else, it needs to be done probably a little bit slower or over hire at the beginning and say, you're no longer a player coach, you're only a coach, and let's meet a lot to make sure that we talk about all of what you're learning, because you can't operationally keep both things at a high level.
Yeah. Well, and on that note, Ben, I mean, I'd like your opinion on this. I mean, at this point in my career, I kind of don't think there is a clean leap from level 1 to level 2, meaning that anytime you take one owner or one management team, and then all the individual contributors, and you start to build management layers. I've never been able or never seen that just be a linear growth. It's always a little bit of a messy step back. To me, that's what it's been. It is a necessary step that you take. But I think we as business owners always want it to be like this linear, like, oh, the next step is going to take me to the next level. And I think that, it's kind of like when you're hiking up the mountain and you're lost and you ask someone, you say, hey, how do I get to the top? And they're like, well, you actually can't get to the top from here. You got to go back down the mountain and go to the right and take a different trail. And then you can get to the top, right? Kilimanjaro, right. Which I know you're training for. And most people don't want to hear that. They're just like, no. I'm emotionally not ready to go back down the hill. I'm only willing to move forward. Like, does that resonate with you? Like, if you did this again, you start another company tomorrow, do you feel like you could circumvent that going back down the hill? Or do you think that's just kind of a natural part of the process?
I think having some knowledge and doing it, I would hope to not do that. But I bet you there's always going to be a drop down, because there's always going to be a casualty. You got to accept a new person needs to go out and learn their own mistakes. So I think in that way, there's a casualty. But if I were to do it again, I think making sure that the leadership or the management team is staffed as well as the operational team is staffed. It's not to add crazy amount of reports, because you need all the different pieces done of the company, and you need it done quickly. That if you don't have enough people at the top to oversee stuff, that's going to fail, because these people are not going to be efficient. They're not going to be doing the jobs correctly. And, there could be a lot of chaos going on. But if you overstaff the management, it's a fine balance. But yeah, to do it again, though, I would make sure I am staffed well enough with those coaches, those good leaders, almost ahead of making sure I'm staffed properly for the operational side of things.
So it sounds like all of your leaders really have been promoted. You're not really out in the marketplace just hiring leaders. Am I understanding that correct? Most of them have been promoted from within?
Everyone.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So how many of those original people have made it and survived to the next level? All of them, or a section of them?
You mean up into the manager level?
Yeah.
Yeah. Our leadership team is the same today as it was in day one. So everyone's still here, and same with the mid levels. Yeah, those are the people who are identified as a high performance person I don't want to say that out loud and jinx myself. So, but yes, they usually stay with the company, and they are given a career, a culture, career, coaching, all of that. They're given all the skill sets to make sure that they're happy. Hopefully they make enough money, and, they are encouraged enough and have enough inspiration to move forward, and stay with the company long term.
Yeah.
I don't want to lose any of them.
This is one of the points I really wanted to ask you about, because I heard from third party, and we've worked together a long time, and I asked you about this, and I've been sniffing around, Ben, and it seems like all of your management team, which would be, if you ask me as a small business owner, my management team are some of the greatest assets I have, right? So when I think about how do I value my company, and like what would happen if I got sick tomorrow, or something, if I wanted to sell the company, I really look at my leaders as one of the best assets I have, functionally. And it sounds like all of your best assets, all of your leaders have been developed from within. They were hired outside of property management. They had never been, like, you didn't steal anybody away. Like, this isn't like, hey, I'm like watching all the other Orlando property managers, and I'm like totally poaching their executives. Like, you've literally like planted seeds and homegrown these leaders. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, fair to say. I drafted well.
You drafted well. I like that term. I drafted well. But you didn't just draft well. I mean, because these guys were not, like when you draft in football, they know what that role looks like. You actually recruited, and you convinced them there was a new path for them, right? Like, they weren't like, oh my gosh, if I get a 4.0 in English, like, I will finally be able to be a property manager, veteran, and like, do this. Like, you're offering this role to people that didn't even know it existed. So I just want you to talk about that. Like, talk about that experience as like, you're finding people, you're looking for something, you know, because again, there's no community college or 4-year degree out there, like training property management sales and property management, you know, maintenance. So you've got to bring people in and you've got to convince them that there's something to go. And I don't want you to under focus on that. I really want you to say to us, like, how do you get these young people to be excited about this job and actually show them that there's a career path there?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, giving them whenever they were hired, you know, they were hired with, you know, let's say we hired 5 people or something like that. There might be 1 or 2 that have high potential, and then, you know, and have been picked out of the pack, I guess. And when we did that, they were, you know, they were just starting to get some extra tools, a little bit more responsibilities and things like that to just what am I trying to say? I'm trying to say, like, if you give a person responsibility and kind of an unlimited growth potential, and they came here without a whole lot of preconceived notions of what the business was, and they can create their own path. They're almost running their own little entrepreneurial spirits and business. They are able to free think and kind of bring a lot more back to the business and a lot more ideas, and say, hey, what if we did this? Hey, if we did that? And I think that kind of coaching and encouragement can, you know, we might not know where the end goal is. Back then we didn't have EOS and didn't really have our 10-year goals and things like that. But
yeah.
I think given a challenge to younger people or people in transition in life, that's more what it is. It's like, I want a new career. I don't want to dive too much, but that seems to happen a lot. I want a different career, or I don't know what to do. I've graduated with an English degree or an architect degree, but I don't really want to be an architect. What do I do? And they want an opportunity just to say, here, you know, I can be good at something. I just don't know what it is yet. And I think as long as you give them challenges and opportunities and ways to prove themselves through management, through performance, through just critical thinking, and come up with creative ways of doing things better, it really inspires people. It inspires me. I mean, I don't know where exactly we're going to end up, but just having the challenge and knowing that there's no one really here to say no. There's no one here, you know, coming from a NASA background. My biggest problem with corporate environment and in space was, I am not allowed to do this. Yeah. Even though this is a better idea. No, we've done it a million times. We're doing it this way, or you're not allowed to take that risk. That doesn't hit everyone's agenda. So bringing some of that mentality back into here and say, all you got to do is talk it out. And if you think that's the right move, and we haven't failed at it in the past, let's try it out. If it fails, we can talk about it. It's no big deal. But to remove that red tape and let people just, again, free think and just go for it. It's it allows them to do a lot of things. So when we identify a high potential person, that's all we're really doing. That's, you know, we're just giving them a path to blossom and do their thing, and we're giving them bumper lanes. You know, they're, as you taught me, even when we're doing, you know, writing our playbook, you told us how to bumper the client on the, you know, you're letting them do all the talking, but you're controlling where they go. And as a manager, you're doing that as well. You're bumping them back and forth, just make sure they don't fall off the cliff.
Keeping them in bounds, right? Letting them do what they want to do, but keeping them in bounds.
Yeah. And you know, not everything's going to work, but you can bump as a manager. You can, I don't know about that, or why don't you go try that? And what are you going to say success is? Well, if I can do this, okay, we'll go try that, and come back. Yeah, that didn't work. You know, you didn't really say a whole lot, but you kind of knew that wasn't going to work. But if I told them, hey, that's not going to work, you can't do that, they're going to be like, I think it's a good idea. You know, they're going to have some resentment and things like that. So really like removing that kind of, you know, mentality from my previous careers.
So giving them the latitude to kind of try things, feel like they can flex their ideas and fail, and that there's a safety net. It sounds like that's kind of a that's like a competitive advantage for you in terms of like keeping people engaged.
Yeah. If they're not engaged, then what are they doing here?
Yeah.
I mean, no one wants a distant paycheck, and if that is why you're here, it's going to be pretty obvious.
Well, I love this point, Ben, because I talked to some other property managers and they just think, no, it's not a sexy job, Jeremy. Like they literally said that to me. They're like, guys, it's not really a sexy job. And I'm just like, why have people if they're not ready to go to war with you? That's like my little statement, and I know everybody has their own thing. I'm like, why employ people if they're not ready to go to battle with you? And I love that you say that. It seems like you really want your people engaged, no matter what level they are, what age they are. Like you want to engage people. Is that fair to say?
It's very fair to say.
Yeah.
At every level, if someone doesn't like the way something's being done, they're able to raise their hand, and they have access to me or anyone else. Especially if we're going to design tech around it. But yeah, even the guy who started, last week, I just had a meeting this morning about it, and he's like, hey, what if I did this way? I'm like, that's a good idea. I mean, he's a remote worker in a foreign country, and he's been with us a week, and he came up with a great idea. Yeah. Let's go for it. And then let's let everyone else know what you're doing, so everyone's on the same page, so you're not going rogue, and we implement it. So I think that really is, as long as there's not all that red tape, I think we all can kind of move together and really want to be here, not because we have to be here. We don't want that to happen.
Exactly.
And the people who didn't want to be here they're no longer here for one reason or another, which is interesting. But a lot of even listen to owners. Anyways, that's another thing.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you about that, Ben. I mean, do you have any way to assess kind of employee engagement? Do you guys do NPS scores or ask people how they feel, or is it just all gut? I mean, how do you keep your pulse on your team and know that they're happy?
That's a good question. We don't have like an employee survey per se. We do NPS for our customers.
Yeah.
So we do, and we analyze all of that good stuff. But yeah, a pulse of that's the one-on-one meeting by the manager to see how well this person's engaged, how are they feeling, knowing something about them personally. Are they going through something? Do they want to set a personal goal, and then we can help support them? That's how we tell them as managers. We meet up and make sure that everyone on the bus is happy. Does anyone want to change different seats? There is that opportunity to switch up those seats.
Nice.
And yeah, it's more just a real personable ask. And
how often are those one-on-ones? Is that monthly, quarterly, weekly?
By the managers. Everyone should have a one-on-one 30 minutes with their manager every week.
So everybody meets with their manager once a week.
Once a week, yes. And
it's really good.
And maybe their leadership team manager, maybe once a month, maybe it's every other month, to have like a skip level meeting.
Yes, I love the skip level. Do you have a rule about how many people can manage? Like, is it just department, or do you like, and so on that note, as you answer that question, Ben, how many people report directly to you? I'm curious about that. And then what do you think, how many people should be reporting to each manager?
Yeah, I'm not happy about, I sit in multiple seats, and those are seats that are going to be hired probably break the rule at some level. So
yeah.
But
you mean both, Ben, so I totally get what you're saying.
Yeah, finance and technology are two jobs that take a skill set that can be outside of, that just has to be known. Yeah. You can't teach that accounting or finance and this. You can teach basics, but you can't leadership level. So I have 8 reports.
Okay.
HR and finance and then the technology people, and then of course the COO. But I think 8's a good number. 6 to 8, 6 to 10 maybe, if they are a dynamic person. But more than that, there's not enough time in the day to effectively manage. And we've seen that fail. So we know that from experience, when we're missing those mid levels. And that's one of the reasons why we pushed them up faster than they might have been ready. But anyways, now we know.
And am I right in assuming that it doesn't matter if they're local or remote, global, like it's just 8 bodies or 8 bodies. Doesn't matter how they show up, right?
Yeah, there's no difference in when you manage people. They remote, any job can be done in Orlando or anywhere else in the world, but we don't have a specific difference. They can even manage people.
Yeah.
Outside of Orlando. If they have the right skill sets.
What's your pie chart look like? How many people are there in Orlando and how many people are not in Orlando?
It's 55% out are remote workers now.
Okay, so just over half are remote and just under half are there.
Yeah, and that includes sales, and that includes all of our field team. So those jobs can't be done by remote workers. So if you take away that, it's much less. It's only 15 or 18 of the potential 50 slots are Orlando. Of
course.
Orlando, yeah.
Yeah. So the majority of your local workers are people that literally need to be local, that are going to see the property, doing things.
Or happen to be a manager and been here a while.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So one of the things I really want to key in on is that, you started, and it seemed, my interpretation is it was like a kind of a 2-level company, right? It was like it was like the management and it was everybody else. And then at some point you started to say, okay, this is not scalable. I can't have 27 people reporting to me or somebody else, right? And so you started to think that through. And my guess is, from what I'm talking to you about, what you and I have talked about privately, is those people weren't ready yet, right? Like they didn't wake up on a Tuesday and be like, I want to be a manager. I'm guessing you pushed this on them. Is that fair to say?
I think it was a slow push, but yes.
Yeah. So what was that conversation like? How did you approach them? How did you say, hey, here's what we're going to do? Like, if I'm a business owner and I've got 4 or 5 employees and I see 3 of them have some major opportunity and I could do this, like, where do I start? Like, how do I approach that next level? Because this is a scary thing for entrepreneurs. I'm sure you remember those days. Yeah. Maybe you were like me and you were naive and you're like, yeah, we can just do it. Like, no problem. Like, I'm just going to fire the gun. But like, I think this is really scary for a lot of people.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it starts out with I think it starts out in the training world. Like, why don't you work with this person and, help them achieve something?
Okay.
I think it can be super simple, like where you're not managing them, but you're helping them with the process, or you're giving advice or things like that. And then can you accomplish that task that I asked you? Can you, whatever the task is, can you accomplish that minor task of doing that? So it's like being a little project manager maybe, or something like that. But I think giving those I guess little tasks or little challenges to those people can really start to see how they handle people. Because if you say you're not allowed to push the buttons, or you're not allowed to solve it on your own, they need to make sure that they can do it next time. How does that work? And I think that's how we probably do it. It's trial by fire. Like, go for it. Yep. Start asking me questions. I'll be here for you. I'll, ask questions. But
so kind of give them the responsibility before you give them the title. Like, hey, go do it. And then eventually earn the title.
100%. When the title doesn't exist, that's exactly how everyone on leadership got their job. Was they earned it. Even when we sat down and said, okay, this is who the leadership team's going to be, we didn't know who was going to hold what seat. And so they voted in the integrator at that time. and it was a group vote and it was unanimous. So those are really cool moments as a manager to see, like everyone's just kind of on the same track, everyone's figuring it out together. So that was cool to see. So, but everyone has to earn their job. Even the individual contributors, they were still holding those training sessions and stuff.
Yeah.
But when they got 7 reports overnight, there still is a lot more skill sets. There is not an overnight, and that's what I think we already talked about.
And how big is the leadership team today?
It is 6 people. 6. So there's 4 who run the business, and then my business partner runs the sales side. So and then me. So
okay, got it. And so taking you and your business partner out of the equation, what do you think the average age of this leadership team is?
Probably, and now probably 30.
Yeah. Okay.
32. Yeah.
Yeah. So young into their career, not green, not, completely not there, but still not executives that you stole away from some other company. I think that's worth pointing out, because I think sometimes people think about their leadership team and they immediately start coming up with these ideas that it's like, oh, it's got to be someone who's already done it before. And like, it's, I got to steal them away. But it sounds like everyone's just been elevated and they're relatively still pretty young in their career.
Yeah. Yeah. Very much so. All of us are young in our career. If I'm at 9 years, Jason, he's on the leadership and he's a year to the day less than me. So he's 8 years, but yeah, we're all new to the business. But if you drop it though, I bet you that average age is 24 to the mid-level managers.
Yeah.
There's a couple 22s in there. There's some really young people that have been here for 3 or 4 years, came in at 18.
But they're still performing and the business is running. I think this is a big share that I wanted to make sure we talked about is the right person. It doesn't matter how old they are. If you got the right person and you got the right systems, because it doesn't sound like if I showed up tomorrow, I'm a fairly capable person, Ben. I hope you think that, but like you would be handing me some guidelines. Like I wouldn't just be showing up and figuring it all out, right? You'd be like, hey, these are the KPIs. This is your scorecard. And I would know how to govern myself, right? Like so you guys have that figured out. You know what the boundaries are for these managers.
Yeah, I think we've all agreed upon them.
Yeah,
the boundaries and figured that out together. So, yeah,
I think that's one of the big steps that maybe I don't want to be overselling. I don't want to convince you of anything, but I'm thinking that through, and it's just that is material. Intellectual property, IP for a company is like, hey, this is what a manager is judged on. And we don't all have that when we start, right? You had to figure that out. Like you went through that messiness, but now that you have that, it's actually like really valuable. And if one of those people goes on maternity leave or leaves you next tomorrow, like now you are better off and you know how to hire the next person. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. We talk about that and have succession planning and all that stuff in place as well.
Yeah,
sure.
I think this is just a super valuable thing that not enough of us think about as business owners and entrepreneurs is like, what does that role look like? And the longer the right person is in the role, the better clarity you get on what that role should look like and like what to judge it on. Like, so we talk about ideal scene all the time. It's like, we hire, like when you think about what we do, we hire BDMs for other companies all the time. Like I always say at the end of the day, like we know what a good BDM looks like. We know what they smell like. We know what they sound like. We know what they look like. And like, that's what you're paying us for. Because if you've never hired that person before, it's like the wilderness. And I'm sure you can copy and paste that to all of your executive positions. It's like, I know what a good director of marketing looks like. I know what a good maintenance manager looks like, once you have that really great person, I feel like everything changes and you just kind of know, okay, no problem. Like if I have to hire the second one, at least I know what I'm looking for. I know what I'm judging them against,
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of us as business owners appreciate how important that is, because, coming in, you had no idea what all your management positions look like, correct?
Right. And to be honest, to replace one of them would be, it would be super hard, but at least we know what it can look like. So I agree with you there. But yeah, it's, if any of the leadership team like left, it wouldn't call it catastrophic, but it would definitely hurt a heck of a lot, because those are the people that you don't want to let off the bus, or
Yeah.
you don't want them to get off the bus.
Yeah, it'd be a
Not
step
chained
back.
in there, and you want them drinking the juice as long as you drink the juice. So because they have invaluable knowledge if they ever wanted to have a career change or go to something else.
So
Yeah.
if I have a great leadership team that I want to keep in, what are your thoughts? How do you keep them engaged? How are you proactively, I always call this proactive recruiting. They're already on your team, but you're keeping them on your team, right? And you use the sport analogy, which I love, but it's like, how do you keep them engaged? How do you keep them, on your team? Any tips on that?
I honestly think it's the same answer I gave before, is just keeping them able to run their departments and not have any red tape, and encourage and teach and coach, and have critically think and come up with great ideas. I think that's all this. It doesn't really matter a leadership person versus a new hire, really.
Making them feel useful, making them feel like they're really in charge,
They're
autonomous.
contributing. Yeah, they're not being micromanaged in any way. And of course, pay is important as well. As we grow up together and we're a growing company, hopefully you make more money.
Yeah.
At least you should. But hopefully you're not. Everyone's here for a paycheck, but hopefully that's not the main reason why you're here. Is you're just here to grow with the company and see where we can take this thing.
Yeah. I don't know if everyone's here for a paycheck, but I think you are here for a paycheck until the paycheck is enough. And then you're here for other reasons, right? That's just my thought.
Yeah.
But okay, so I had a really good question and now I just spaced on it, but I want to ask you this. And this is for my own curiosity. Okay. So I've got some great talented people. I've had many great talented people in all my businesses, and I put them in charge. And they've got some great ideas, but those ideas don't necessarily lead to the benchmarks and the results that I think are important for the department. So how do you let people be autonomous and let them do what they want to do? But it's like, hey, I want to go X, like with the department, and I don't care how you get there. And they're like, no, I think we should go Y. Have you ever dealt with that? Like where they're just like, we're going a totally different direction. Like, how do you manage the overall business with these creative, talented people?
That's a great question. So I can see that much more apparent in a marketing and a sales position, because there's a lot more creativity that happens than to manage people and operation processes that happens. But there are company metrics that have to be made. There's like in sales and marketing, there's a customer acquisition cost, and that is your number. And we have to bring in X amount. So typically we agree upon, we have to keep the number here, and our core part of the job is this. You're allowed 20% of free spend. You got $100,000 marketing spend, $20,000. You're allowed to go and try to prove that you can beat the house in how we're converting, and that will give enough creativity. Same with I don't know, doing inspections and tenant, anything like that. You can give them, okay, go try that, but you're still going to be held to the house's numbers, and and we have to still stay on track. These are the company metrics that keep us healthy. Our churn rates, our doors added, our renewal rates, our late rents, or all these things come into play. That those numbers are non-negotiable. And I think we all understand that.
I love that. So each role, I mean, the company in general has a few non-negotiable numbers, and then it's pretty easy to divide those up and being like, hey, if you're in a sales role, this is applicable to you. If you're in a customer service role, this is applicable to you. And then it sounds like you're also giving them a little bit of a slush fund where you're like, hey, go try some crazy stuff. But at the end of the day, if you go try that and it lowers those metrics versus increases those metrics, like it's time to come back, get back on track. So yeah, I like that. I like that. So every role kind of has their key numbers that you guys focus on. I'm guessing you review these on a weekly basis, or, you know, like in the leadership meetings, or a monthly basis.
Depends what they are, but we have live dashboards that are providing data all the time. So yeah, and we have our L10 meetings and stuff. So if it is a department related, then we're also reporting them there. You know, if it is the other time that a crazy idea is allowed is if it's on a quarterly meeting and we state, hey, we want to do this, and we all agree upon it, then we can try something completely new outside the boundaries of whatever that is. We're like setting up a call center right now. That's completely different in every aspect on how we normally do business. We're hiring people for it, and it's just a different way of thinking even.
Sure. Yeah.
We're spending a ton of money on it.
It's a wild card. All right. So, you know, correct me if I'm misspeaking this, but the way that I would summarize it is you're pretty steadfast on the company metrics that have to be hit, the things that you care about. And then you're giving your leaders a lot of latitude to figure out how they hit those numbers. But at the end of the day, like, these are the guideposts. Like, this is what we're doing. We got to get customer acquisition here. We got to keep, you know, renewals in here. We've got to make sure we collect this amount of rent. You know, we got to make sure, you know, our owners give us this satisfaction level. And you're giving a lot of latitude outside of that, even though you've got systems in place. But the numbers are the numbers, and that's how you're kind of managing from the ivory tower, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, the leadership team votes on those, and those are, you know, the quarterly. The numbers you pretty much named there are what we all report every single quarter. Where did we come into this? And we have to hit those numbers. And then how operationally, you know, you run your department is really up to you.
Yeah.
There's a lot of soft skills that are asked, like the one-on-one meetings and those things. And
sure.
But yeah, that's basically how it is. And everyone knows what they have to do. And, you know, I think that's how we're efficient as well, as everyone knows where they stand and everyone knows what they have to do by the end of the day. And I think that's probably one of the hardest things to do in business is, you know, what does success look like in the eyes of your manager? Not in your eyes, and did that manager communicate that? And that's a hard question to ask or answer if you didn't pre-think it.
Yeah.
So
well, I think that's the underappreciation of the responsibility and the value of a manager. Is a manager is making sure we reach the goal line. And they're making sure that we reach the goal line, and it's broken down into a daily and a weekly and a monthly. Like, I think that so many people think of a manager as like this waste or this excess, but I think a really good manager, especially in a small business, is just helping us break down those big goals. Cause like a day is chaotic. Like a week is chaos. Like so many things can happen, you know? And it's like, hey, I can manage the chaos and I can kind of still move the ball 10 yards down, which was my only goal for the week. You know, my only goal was to move the ball 10 yards down the field. And I got there in spite of the chaos. And I just think that too many people underappreciate that is the manager's role. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, that was perfectly stated. Yeah, 100%. That's the manager's job, is just to incrementally make a difference and hit their goal. And, you know, everyone might know that they're trying to score a goal, but they really, sometimes the team might not always know what the next play is. But even though an offensive coordinator already has it all planned out, right? So I think it is being a strategic coach in that way too, and just keeping the team engaged, making them really focus on what's the next task or what's the next incremental change. Those are important things. You can't overwhelm people like that. So.
Well, that's my big takeaway from this call, Ben, and kind of my lesson from you is you are appreciating the duality of you got to keep people engaged, but you also have to keep people on track. Like you can have a really engaged team that's not getting anything done. You can have a team that's doing a bunch of great stuff that's not really engaged. And I think both are dangerous. And so I think that balance is like you're engaged, you're enjoying it, and you're getting shit done and we're moving the ball forward and like we're actually accomplishing our goals. That is kind of the art of like a team and management. And so, I've been kind
And
of
having,
seeing you do that.
and having a scoreboard available as we continue the sports analogy, but if they know what the score is and how much time's left, they can start making their own decisions and helping, move the needle, move the ball down the field as well, instead of only having the quarterback throw the ball. But we're getting really far into the analogies, but yeah, everyone has to know the score of the game though. That's just so important. They have to know what they are responsible for that day or for that play.
Yeah, totally.
Even the guy we just hired has to know what their play is for the day. And it's not a bunch of tasks either. It's like, what am I operationally responsible for? And it's up to me to figure out how to get all those things done. Instead of saying, go renew these 7 leases and let me know when you're done. That's not, the way we teach process, at least, so.
What would you say in contrast to that?
You need to keep your renewal rate at this amount, and we don't ever want to see a lease go, is not renewed 45 days before. And it's up to you to figure out how that happens, but you cannot let it go past 45 days. It needs to be renewed, or they have to give their notice. If not, it goes on the board.
Yeah, love it. I love it. That is it. I mean, it's showing the score and making them understand that. And kind of the lesson I've learned in business is that the right people, the people like you and me, are going to thrive in that environment. We're going to show up and be like, it's time to be creative. Like, I know what the game is. Like, I know how to, like, I mean, isn't that what makes sports and games fun, is like, there's rules and there's winners. And then every athlete gets to like kind of decide how they want to approach it. I feel like that is the excitement of like any game or any sport. And so why shouldn't our rules be set up the same way?
Yeah. Competition is good too.
Yeah.
Being on the first team, second team, it all keeps you hungry. And, why do you continue to play whatever sport you play? I mean, you still want to be better at it. And I think that's what gets you coming back.
So I know we're over time, Ben. I have one last question, if you can ease me on this. What's your advice when people, they're the right person, they're hungry, they're showing all the right things, but they're not winning their game, they're not hitting their numbers? Like, what do you do when people are not, living up to the expectations?
Well, they go into a remedial training of some level, and they get a little bit more one-on-one time to see if is it an understanding problem? Is it an organization problem? That's not the right word. Is it like, are they organized? Not organization. Are they organized? Do they know how to keep their inbox clean? And do they know how to operate the phones, or do they have any, so we really try to make sure that's understanding in the one-on-one. So it's a little bit higher focus on them. But yeah, if they're not hitting their numbers, and then we just start stating, you have to keep this level. But then, if it's not, then, we quickly move. We don't try to fix everybody.
You move on. Yeah.
But we'll give them a darn good shot to make sure.
Yeah.
All of us feel good that they had all the tools and they didn't accomplish it. And then we learn from that.
Yeah, that's great advice. It's great advice. I definitely believe in that. I think that, you can't fix everybody, and not everyone's meant to succeed, but I do agree with what you're saying, Ben. Like, you want to feel like, hey, I gave them every shot I could. I gave them every tool, and like, I gave these same tools to everybody else who's successful. That starts to give you real clarity. It's like, I gave the same tools to 4 people and one's not able to execute. That's all I need to know. Yeah.
Usually when you start asking those questions, you'll find out some way that, do they want to be here or not be here? And are they going to promise and then still have the same problem next week? Then you're like, all right, you don't want to be here. You're just appeasing me right now. So
this is the hardest part about building a team, right?
Making changes. And and what I'm also learning as you get over a certain number is, and people get here, I think there still is something that Jack Welch's bottom 10%. I do that and I think you can compete harder. You can't do that when you have 10 people. Well, you might be able to get rid of one, but when you can really compete for that and everyone kind of knows that that is an unwritten rule, that,
Yeah.
I might be hitting my numbers, but I'm not performing as good as I could. Because it's hard to believe 100% of the organization is going to all be on the bus competing at that level. Yes, I wouldn't call it naive, but it is kind of naive to even think that.
Sure it is. Yeah.
But when you can level up and get another talented person in the door, and you can prove that this other person who's been here a minute is getting outperformed, the rookie is outperforming the veteran, it's time to retire, and I think that's something we're going to learn as a company next year.
I appreciate you sharing that. That's and I love what you said. It's like, this doesn't make necessarily sense if you have 4 employees, but as you start to scale to a point where the roles are really defined and there's multiple people doing every role, of course it does. Like if you got 7 people doing the same role, 3 of them are going to be the best and the other 4 are going to be laggards, right? And like, why not think about that way?
And the last point to say is, we always hire in the same entry level positions, not low level. And, if those entry level positions are filled and in whatever amount of time is the right amount of time for them to be promoted because we've grown, or there's another opportunity, if we're not going to promote that person, why not? And we do look at that. And, there are going to be certain plateaus for people and they're going to sit at places, but if they're still at the entry level or one up, there's probably something going on here that they can't. And when the managers say, "Oh, they're not ready, but this person is," and they keep on saying that, it's very, it's a good conversation to have with them. Like, why?
Good proxy. Yeah.
Why are you making excuses for so and so?
I'll totally bastardize it, but I remember hearing a good saying. It's like a stepping stone is a stepping stone for a reason. And if you stay on a stepping stone, you're blocking everybody else from going to the next stone. You know what I mean? Like,
that's good.
Now you're like blocking everybody else from moving on to the next stone.
Yeah, you're blocking the trail, man.
Yeah.
And you're clogging up the bottom, and that's not where you want to be. So keep everyone towards the top.
That's a good share. That's a really good share. Well, all right. So just to summarize for the article, how many people are you guys now?
59.
All right, 59 people. How many doors roughly?
Just under 1,600.
About 16. Okay, about just under 1,600. And you've been there, you said in the beginning, but how many years have you been there?
9 years.
9 years. And was there like an inflection point? Was there like a point where you're like, okay, I mean, 9 years, like growth is growth, but I'm guessing it wasn't evenly distributed over 9 years. Like what was the point where you guys started like accelerating, if there was one?
Honestly, it's been pretty consistent.
It has been? Okay.
You're probably only take on 100 to 200 doors probably back in the first 4 or 5 years, 4 years. And then we started taking on 300s, in the 300s probably for the last 5 years or so.
After you hired Rent Scale?
Yeah. After you wrote the playbook and we got our brand map together, figure out what the heck we're doing.
No, you guys have done a lot of great stuff. No, this is great. This is exactly what I wanted to share. I really appreciate it, Ben. I don't think enough people are thinking about their team the way you are. And that's why I really wanted to interview you about this. I have a million other things I want to ask you about for future issues, but I thought specifically, I'm like, who do I know that's really got the like team thing dialed in? And like you came to mind. And so that's why I was like, I want to talk to you about this. I want to share this because I got to be honest, like we got some clients that have like zero competition and we got a great playbook and like we're watching them and like they just can't get the team thing figured out. Like they can't get out of their own way. And like we don't do that, but I'm seeing it, if that makes sense, right? Like as a business owner, I'm like, I'm seeing the problem. The problem is you can't execute. And so I want to share this message with people and have them understand how important the team part is.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of the most important, if not the most.
Great.
Yeah,